Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about properties and explain why we need to use them in JavaFX. And instead of just giving you guys a bunch of definitions, what I want to do is I actually want to show you guys an example, and it'll demonstrate exactly why we need to use properties. So I'm going to make a new class, and I'll say that, I don't know, maybe I have a website or some database and I have a whole bunch of users, so I'm going to store all of their information inside a person class. So what is one of the properties of a person? Well, let's say they have a first name, obviously. So first name, it's a string, and we'll just set it equal to blank. And if we hit Alt Insert, we can throw in all of our getters and setters. So basically, whenever I create an object of type person, for example Bucky, I can get his first name, which would be Bucky, and I could also set his first name to whatever I wanted. So in other words, I can have something like this. I can create an object called Bucky, and it can be a new person, and then I can just, make him do a whole bunch of stuff like set his name. There you go. So Bucky can set his name, he can get his name. I can make another function in here called like punch babies, and just pretty much think of it like that. An object can do things. Alright, simple enough. This is like Java 101. So why am I explaining this? Well, say that I wanted to create a program that was gonna sit and wait and see whenever the value of this property changed, then run a little bit of code. So maybe as they're typing something in real time, you want to update the screen. Alright, well, let me just hop back in here, and alright, we got a little issue because here's the thing. I know that Bucky can do stuff. For example, Bucky can get his name, set his name, punch a baby, eat some hot dogs. But what you're trying to ask me to do is have first name do something. So you pretty much want to stick a listener on first name, but I mean, this is not really an object. It's like part of a bigger object. So we just can't call like first name dot whatever we want to do, because we aren't really viewing this as an object. I mean, I know first name is of type string, and we do have limited options of what we can do with a string, but we can't do cool stuff like stick a listener directly on first name. So you know how I told you guys that Bucky was an object, but string, or this first name, JavaFX doesn't really view it as one? Well, I lied. I apologize, but I had to do it. So let me clean this up and I'll explain something really cool. So whenever we're using JavaFX, what we can do is we can actually treat these properties as an object. Now, one of the main reasons that people like to do this is because once you do that, you can add a listener on that first name, for example. And another cool thing, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this in probably the next tutorial, you can actually have two properties, maybe a first name and a last name, and you can bind them together. In other words, you can attach them, and then when you change the value of the first name, the last name automatically changes without any additional code needed. It sounds kind of crazy, but I'm going to show you guys an example, like I said, later on. Don't want to overwhelm you guys, so let's figure out how to actually treat these values as properties. Well, if you just make a new private variable and you use string property, as you see, it imports this package right here. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to create it in a similar kind of way. So first name, and set this equal to new simple string property. Now, string property, of course, is just what I was talking about. It's not a regular string, it's a property. In other words, we're going to do some cool stuff to it. And this is actually just an abstract class. And this right here, simple string property, this is the class that you use whenever you want to instantiate, or in other words, create new string properties that you can read and write to. So again, this is just that abstract class, the type of object, and this is for whenever you want to create something that you can actually read and write from, or write to, whatever. And it actually takes three parameters. These are easy to understand. The first one is going to be this most of the time. It just refers to the object that contains it. so this. And the second one is the name, in other words, first name. And the last one is the default value. So whenever we create this, it just has a default value of nothing, no name or anything like that. So actually, if you hold down Alt Insert, we're going to do this the real lazy way. We're going to throw in all of our getters and setters. Alright. Would you look at that? Alright, you would think that since we had a getters and setters that we would just have a getter and a setter, but it gave us 3 different methods. So actually, let me arrange this a little bit easier to understand. Alright. So I'm actually going to comment this for when I post it on GitHub. Returns the string. Whoa, moly, don't do that. Alright. So here's the thing. You know how we can pretty much store a first name in here like Bucky, just like before? Well, this getter and this setter act as you would expect. So what this one is going to do is it's going to return, okay, my fingers are slapping all over the keyboard, return, I'll just say the first name value, i.e. Bucky. So this is pretty much going to be your traditional getter. It's going to return the value of that object like you would expect. And this one, of course, the same, set the first name value. Alright, so we pretty much know what those do. Nothing new. What the heck is this? This is actually going to return the object itself. So not the value, not Bucky. It's going to return this object. And we need that whenever we, do cool things like add a listener to it. So now if we hop back over in main.java, what we can do is we can start using this like we normally would. Just create a new person. So now we have an object named Bucky and he doesn't have any name set yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that object and I'm going to call first name property. In other words, Bucky's first name, and I'm going to add a listener to it. Now, this is going to be called whenever the value of first name changes. So whenever we give him a name, whenever we change his name, this code that we're going to write in here is going to be kicked off. And you guys saw this syntax before. If you just say something, let me clean this up. V, old value, and new value. So it's going to pass in 3 values. This is the object, this is the old value. So if we're changing Bucky to Sally, this is going to be Bucky, this is going to be Sally. And then we can just run a little bit of code, whatever logic that we want. Alright, so what I'm going to actually do is just print out some stuff on the screen so you see what's going on. And let me just copy this little thing right here. Alright, so what can I print out? I'll say name change to new value. So this first line will say whenever we change his name, it's going to say name change to Bucky, Sally, whatever. And for the other one, I actually just print out this right here because I want to demonstrate the difference between the actual value of Bucky in the object, because that's kind of confusing for some people. So the first thing I'm going to do is print out the object, and it's going to look a little bit goofy, but it's Bucky first name property. And by the way, in your code you typically don't want to, well, I want to say for the user interface, you typically don't want to use this a lot because this is going to print out like essentially where the object is in memory and what it looks like to Java behind the scenes. So the last thing I'm going to do is print out is get first name. And Bucky get first name. So whenever you actually want to get the user's name, for example, and display it to the user, then you would call, just your basic getters and setters. So what I'm actually going to do is this. I'm going to say whenever we click the button, what I'm going to do is just submit an event, and we'll just say Bucky set first name equal to Porky. Alright, so one last time, what this program is going to do is it's going to set up a listener on the first name, so whenever the user changes the name, it's going to emit this event right here. Don't believe me? Oh, hopefully it works. Alright, so I'm going to hit submit and check it out, and I'll explain. And let me switch over to here. Alright, so this right here, well, we saw name changed to Porky. That was just the value of it. Get first name, that's just your typical getter, like before, returns Porky. And this first name property, this right here, is the actual property object. So it has a value of this. Again, like I said, you usually wouldn't want to show that to the user too much. But again, once we have, did my voice just crack? God, that's embarrassing. Alright. But anyways, once we have properties, then we can do cool things like add listeners to them and also bind them together. And I'll show you guys how to do that in the next tutorial. For now, that's the basics of it. And yeah, not really useful now, but wait till you learn about binding. It's going to be awesome. I'll see you then.